Hey, Future Lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, folks, quick amendment. So I filmed the whole episode already, which you're about to listen to. In the episode, I talk a lot about how law schools are going to lose funding from federal loans. And after getting off, I realized a consideration that I hadn't quite articulated or thought about. I mean, I didn't think about it, nor did I talk about the impacts. So the point that I wanted to touch on, and I will insert this clip at the beginning of the podcast, so just keep this in mind when I'm talking about the revenue. Law schools are not losing all of their federal loan revenue. They're only going to lose 1/3, because while they do lose the people that are coming in next fall with their loans, they are not going to lose their 2Ls and their 3Ls. So they're only going to lose 1/3 of revenue this year. Next year, they will lose 2/3 revenue. And then afterwards, they will lose all of their revenue. So they won't have a full loss of federal loan dollars until 2028. So my predictions about how catastrophic this is going to be are not as high. In fact, I want to amend my predictions downwards. So you hear me talk about how I might be missing a piece of the puzzle. This is the piece of the puzzle I missed. That being said, over these 3 years, I would still expect my predictions to come true. I think we are still going to see a contraction of the legal market, and you're about to hear my extreme takes. But I did want to quickly jump in and amend my predictions, which is that it is not as extreme this year. It is still a giant problem these law schools are going to have to reckon with, but they're not going to reckon with this next fall entirely. They're going to reckon with 1/3 of the problem, then they're going to reckon with 1/3 of the problem the year after, and then 1/3 the year after that. But the full change in terms of cutting off the federal loan dollars does not hit until 2028. And having that thought, I wanted to get in there and amend it, because whenever I see issues in my thinking, which we just identified one, I missed a piece of information that does matter. I want to amend it. So now you're going to listen to Ben mouth off about stuff and honestly be wrong in some of the predictions I make, but that's why I was wrong. I didn't factor in the timeline in which these effects hit, and we're very evidence-based here. So when we make something wrong, we try to amend it. That being said, my predictions still stand over the long term. It's just the timeline the schools have to figure things out is a little bit longer than I had initially thought, which is they only had about a year. They actually have, well, they have a year until 1/3 of it hits, but it's 1/3, not all of it, which was a premise I was mistakenly operating off of. So that might make sense. It might make more sense at the end. So I'm actually going to insert this explanation at both the beginning and the end. Listening to what I just said might make more sense after you've listened to the whole episode. Just ignore it. If you get to the end and you're like, I don't want to hear Ben talk about that again, I already listened. But anyways, I thought that was important to insert. And with that, you can hear my crazy predictions about what's going to happen. Hey folks, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about why this upcoming cycle is going to be one of the craziest law school admission cycles arguably ever. And I think the overall admissions conversation is not where it should be. I'm going to lay out my argument for why I think this is going to be a giant cluster, the worst cycle ever, and it is not being talked about to the level it should. This is a cycle where things are going to change. In my opinion, schools are going to no longer exist. The level of LSAT score and GPA you're going to need to get into law school is going to be unprecedented. And this has to do with a few reasons. One, we have more applicants, but then the bigger change is the loan changes, where law schools are no longer able to get unlimited money from the federal loan system. This affects law schools hugely, and it has not been addressed. So that's the prelude. Let's get into it. So first off, it's worth touching on what is happening. And the first thing I want to hit on is the number of applicants is incredibly up. Last year in 2025, so the people that applied in the fall of 2024 to attend in the fall of 2025, so that's the people starting law school right now, applications were up 18.3% year over year. Not only were applications up, which makes it harder to get into law school because law schools do not substantially change their price, or not their price, but the number of seats they have. Harvard takes roughly 400, 500 people per year, and this doesn't really fluctuate. So what happens is when there's more applicants, it gets harder to get one of those spots. When there's fewer applicants, it gets easier. And right now it is really surging. There have been times when it has been substantially easier to get into law school. This is not one of those times. This is the hardest time in living memory. I believe in the early 2000s, law school admissions was pretty hard, where the median LSAT of Harvard or Yale was at about a 175. But for the past 20-ish years, it's been pretty easy. After the great financial crisis, there was quite the dip. This was in 2008-ish. I think it was actually stayed good for a couple years because a bunch of people having been laid off decided to attend law school. But if you look at the incoming LSAT medians and GPA medians in like 2011, things were really turning downwards. And by like 2013, 2014, things were aggressive. Then it kind of, fizzled out. Come 2020 with COVID, we started to see it increase, and it's been increasing year over year since then. So 2023 was the worst cycle ever. Then 2024 was the worst cycle ever. And now it looks like 2025. Well, 2025 was the worst cycle, at least of living memory. I guess I should be careful saying ever. How was it compared to the 90s? I honestly have no idea because I don't know what the 90s were like. I have to imagine it's more competitive, but I don't know. What I do know is that in living memory, it has just been getting harder and harder year over year. And this trend does not stop at the number of applications. Not only has the number of applications continued to increase year over year, the LSAT scores have gone up. So while the number of applicants was up 18%, the number of LSAT scores in that 170 to 180 range was up like 30 to 40%, depending on the range. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it is 30 to 30. Well, actually, I'll pull it up. Instead of citing, I'll just take the 5 seconds to Google it. So LSAC puts out data on this. If you're curious, you can look up LSAC test, or not test taker, current volume summary. If you search that up, a website will come up that you can click on, and you can see all the current volume summary of what is happening. I don't know if they switched over to the current cycle as opposed to last cycle, but I'm loading it up right now. And yes, it's still last cycle. So last year for 2024, there were 61,000 applicants to law school. And last cycle, which just ended because people are in law school, so there's no more admissions, but it just ended. There were 72,000 applicants. So that's an increase of about 11,000. So that's an increase of 17.8%. However, if you look at the high score ranges, it is even worse. From 160 to 164, it is up 20%. So that is over the increase. From 165 to 169, it is a 31.7% increase in the number of applicants. From 170 to 174, it is a 35.4% increase. And remember, this is in contrast to an increase of 17.8%. So the delta is really a delta of about 18% more 170 to 174s than you would expect. And then for 175 to 180s, this is the biggest increase. There's a 44% increase in those top numbers. Now, it's not totally a 44% increase because you have to subtract the overall increase. Because if you're looking at the increase in just those people, you want to consider it in relation to the applicant pool. But the long story short is that applications are up. And not only are those applications are up, but the quality of those applications are up. People have higher LSATs. Now, GPA data is not public, but I would wager that it is also increasing. I do not know this, but this is based upon the fact that score or grade inflation is a thing. Further, the kids in school currently have ChatGPT. So I don't know if that makes school easier because I have not been in school with ChatGPT, but I imagine it would. I would imagine the amount of people that just miss an assignment, say posting on a discussion board in Canvas, as many people do. A lot of people just miss those and lose points. Even if you're going to throw up a shitty response, I'm guessing it's pretty easy to throw something up nowadays. So I have to imagine that grades have gone up. And then further, people expect really high grades. It's actually a problem where I'll get someone with a 4.0 and I'll get people with 4.0s who it confuses me, just to put it mildly. I talk to them and I'm like, I don't understand how you earned this. And in contrast, I've talked to people with lower GPAs who are very impressive. So I have learned to not trust GPAs. They are directionally correct. Typically, when you talk to someone with a high GPA, yes, they are more with it. They are more put together, but there are plenty of exceptions and enough exceptions to the point to where I don't trust them. LSATs are super trustworthy. I've never talked to someone with a high 170s who's not with it. You can have people that are disorganized, not all 175s are the same, but they do share a common thread, which is that they can figure out at least this one test. So I find LSATs to be more reliable. But here's the thing. LSATs are being jacked up now. Because in the like we talked about, the number of law schools is relatively consistent. Maybe they add one a year, one closes, but it's about 180 some ABA law schools. And the number of seats does not really change. For the school to admit 20% more people, even though there's 20% more applicants, doesn't really make sense. They don't have the professors for it. They don't have the building for it. They don't have the parking for it. So what happens is it just tends to get more difficult. Now, there are schools that will over-admit, and that is also actually a problem because while it might make law school easier to get into, in the meanwhile, this all hurts come 3 years from now when people graduate and there's too many lawyers for not enough legal jobs because there's not more legal work just because there is an increase in applicants. There's still the same amount of contracts, businesses, all that stuff that requires legal stuff. Hopefully there's not more crime that requires more criminal defense attorneys. But the point is that even if law schools over-admit, which for the most part they don't do, but even if they did, it just pushes the problem down the road to a point where now there's too many applicants, or not too many applicants, but too many newly minted lawyers in a given state for the amount of legal work. So what is all this saying? Well, what all this is saying is it sucks to be you guys right now. This is a bad time to apply to law school, which is obviously shitty for you because you didn't choose to apply today. I'm guessing just given your life circumstances, this is when it makes sense to apply to law school. But the reality is it's bad. Now, that's not really what I want to talk about today. It is worth touching on because it kind of sets the stage for some other stuff. But anyways, applications are up. So there's more people applying. more competition. And why are scores going up? Because we just talked about the high scores in that 170 to 180 range. They're up about 35% for 170 to 174s. They're up 44% for 175 to 180s, 30% for high 160s, 20% for mid 160s. And then everything below that is actually increasing at a slower rate than the number of applicants. So the number of people with below 140s is up 11%, which sounds like an increase, but it's actually a decrease because the number of applicants is up 18%. So overall, in terms of a percentage of the applicant pool, the really low number of people is going down. Why is that? Why are scores changing? Well, I have a few hypotheses. I will note before I get into these are speculation. I don't actually know the reasoning. I don't know that anyone knows the reasoning. Even LSAT is probably guessing at best, but I have a few predictions. The first off is that the LSAT has changed. Not in terms of the types of questions they ask you. If you go on the internet, you'll get nonsense about how logical reasoning or reading comprehension is evolving, to which the answer is no. But logic games did go away. There used to be a third section of the LSAT called logic games. They were basically these Sudoku puzzles. I thought they were really fun. I also thought they were really easy. But this made the test 3 sections as opposed to 2 sections. And it's inherently easier to study 2 things than it is to study 3 things. Even if that third thing is the easiest, which I would contend it was, it's still another thing you have to study. It's like if you're going to go to school, would you rather take calculus, history, and a film class? Even if the film class is the easiest, it's easier not to take it because now you just don't have to study at all. It opens up all this time that you can then allocate to your other harder courses. And that's why I think getting rid of logic games actually made the test easier. Now, I initially thought that it would make the test harder because logic games was the easiest section. And a lot of people never missed questions on logic games. You could just get a perfect score every time. Once you were not even elite at logic games, once you were just competent at logic games, you would get really perfect scores. And reading common logical reasoning can get to that point, but it's much more difficult in terms of the man hours you have to sink into studying. I think to get to perfect logic games might take someone 30 hours of hard studying. To get to perfect logical reasoning, probably hundreds of hours for the average person, maybe 500 hours. And for this is me spitballing, so don't write this down. But just to give you an idea of the difference in scale of effort required to get to perfection, it was much lower for logic games than it was for logical reasoning and for reading comprehension. Anyways, further, so it does make the test simpler in that there's one less thing to study. It also lowers the intimidation. While logic games was the easiest once you studied it, a lot of people, upon initially seeing it, were like, this is like, what is this? This is like a different language. I'm not a math person. I'm going to law school for a reason. And as such, when they removed logic games, that barrier that prevented a lot of people from ever really starting the LSAT got removed. And while, in my opinion, logical reasoning and reading comprehension are harder sections of the LSAT, they do not appear harder. They look easier. And it's because people think they are good readers. Even if they're not, it's something familiar. You've done this before. To read a passage and answer questions based on it is something that you've been doing your whole life. Whereas to do logic games was something entirely new. So even if it was easier, it didn't appear that way. So that intimidation factor got brought down. What else is going on? Well, prep is getting better. Like, just admittedly, the LSAT prep landscape is stronger than it's ever been. There is still a lot of bad prep out there, but it has gotten substantially stronger. The incumbent bad prep of like Kaplan and Princeton Review, they're still out there, but their market share has really dropped. And while we still think that we are number one in the LSAT prep landscape at Hey Future Lawyer, we wouldn't exist if we didn't think that, then our competition is stronger. To look at Princeton and Kaplan, there's nothing redeeming about them. It's not even like, oh, there's like, they have this aspect. It's like, there's literally nothing that scares me about them as competitors. They are so easy to beat. And to be fair, we feel this way about most of our competitors. We see something in literally every competitor, which I won't go into, about how we're stronger than. But I look at Princeton and Kaplan, I'm like, how do you guys ever get anyone to 170? I don't feel that way with most of the large competitors nowadays. It's like, I get why they can get some people to strong scores. It's not as strong as it could be, but prep has gotten substantially stronger. And that is partly due to the internet. I mean, the amount of free resources you can find, like for what it's worth, you do have to be a critical reader because there's a lot of free nonsense out there. But if you are a strong reader and you are willing to parse out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, the amount of access on the internet with podcasts like this, with other like YouTube videos, people posting on TikTok. Now there is garbage out there and there's bad advice, but it's better than no advice. And not only no advice, but the advice used to come from authority figures like Kaplan and Princeton Review that fundamentally didn't know what they're saying. And if you don't believe me, there's a great episode of Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, which by the way, Malcolm Gladwell, I mean, this is gonna be a total tangent, but I don't respect his opinions on anything because he did a whole episode on the LSAT and he was so wrong about the LSAT, which is something that I am a subject matter expert in, where I was like, oh, is he full of shit on everything else he talks about too? Does he go into things with his conclusion and then just look for evidence and cherry pick it to get to his conclusion? And I don't know, because I don't know much about the other things he's covered. But after seeing how much he butchered his covering of the LSAT with clearly having his conclusion set out in advance and then working backwards to get to his evidence, I suspect that it tells a lot about his process and his character in terms of how he approaches things. He's not looking for truth. He's looking for evidence to support his conclusions. And anyway, that's a whole tangent. But the point is that you can listen to it. In this episode, he talks to people from Princeton Review, and their advice is that before you even read the question, get rid of the two worst answers, which makes me wonder, how the fuck can you get rid of the two worst answers when you haven't read the question? That's impossible. You don't know what it says. And I should clarify, not the question, the passage. And it's like, whether an answer is good or bad is only in relation to the passage. Literally every answer could be written to be the correct answer to a certain argument or to a certain stimulus. But anyway, it's so absurd. It's like, you clearly don't, like, these people have no idea what they're talking about. They're giving random standardized test gimmicks, which just don't work on the LSAT. The LSAT is a test of comprehension. There are no indicator words. If you're looking for answer choice strength, you are doing the wrong shit. This is a test of understand what's in front of you and figure it out. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to get on a tangent. So let's rein it in, bring it back. We're talking about why scores are going up. So yeah, prep is better. Further, people know a lot more about how consequential the LSAT is, so people work harder for it. There's not a lot of, like, if you talk to lawyers from years ago, many of them will say, oh, I studied for the LSAT for like 2 months, I got an average score, went to law school. That doesn't really work anymore. It doesn't get people the outcomes they want. And as such, people work harder at it, which means they get higher scores, so more competition. And then the real elephant in the room is accommodations. We've talked about this in the past, but accommodations are out of control. The test that people are taking is not the same that it used to be. Back in the day, hardly anyone had accommodations. Everyone took it, or not everyone, I should be careful, but the vast majority of people took it under 35 minutes. I don't even know that that's the majority of people anymore. It might be true that it is a minority of people that take it in the standard 35 minutes. I don't know that for sure, but what I am trying to indicate is that is how widespread accommodations are. When I talk to someone taking it without accommodations, they're the exception. They are not the rule. Most people have bonus time, which makes the test easier. A test that is time constrained is easier under more time. It is honestly annoying that I have to even articulate that point, because occasionally someone will be like, oh, more time doesn't make it easier, at which it's like, I mean, is the LSAT easier under 5 minutes or is it easier under an hour? At which point someone will go, oh, obviously you can't do it all in 5 minutes. I'm like, right. So it's the difference between 35 minutes and an hour. It's on a different point of the scale, but the idea that it's not easier at all, false. Of course it's easier. So anyway, it's absurd that you even have to go down that route, because, like, of course, more time's easier. Having a day would be easier than having 70 minutes. Like, if you could just take it on time, people would score higher. So anyways, the test is getting easier for a few reasons, or at least scores are raising. Maybe it's not that the test material itself is getting easier. In fact, I would argue it isn't. It's basically constant since the oldest LSATs they have released. However, scores are changing due to those main reasons, which is 1, no more logic games, 2, better preparation, 3, more competition. People know it matters more. And then 4, accommodations. As far as how much of the increase you can attribute to each, I don't know. I think a lot of it is the second points, or not the second points, but the latter points in terms of higher competition and accommodations. But there are many things that could be contributing here. Okay, so here's the big thing I want to talk about that people have not been hitting on, and I've kind of buried the lead, so only my loyal listeners are here. Shout out to you all. The loan reforms are much bigger than people anticipate. Back in, I want to say June or July, I can't remember when it was, but the one big beautiful bill was passed. This is the Republican, is it a budget bill? I'm not a congressional expert. That's not what we're here for. We're here for the impact on law school specifically. But the change that we care about as law school oriented people is that it eliminated GradPLUS loans. What GradPLUS loans were, these guaranteed loans that just gave any law school admitted student unlimited access to borrow whatever the law school wanted to charge. So if I'm a law school, I did not have to do a calculation for what's my degree worth it. I could name my price, and the student could go to the government and the government would hand them the money. And now the student didn't have to. They could always choose, I'm not going to go into that debt. But unfortunately, a lot of people misunderstand the return on investment of law school. So they would take out whatever the price was. So if a law school was going to charge me $70,000 and then another $40,000 in living expenses for a total cost of attendance of $110,000 per year, that is a very reasonable number for a school like Cal Western. I could go to the government and the government would say, cool, we're going to give you that money. And not only are we going to give you that money is at roughly, I think it's at 10% interest this year, which is insane. Anyway, so that's a problem because schools like Cal Western, the average grad does not make enough to pay that off. Graduating with that debt will put you at roughly $350,000 in debt upon graduation, and you would never pay that off. So the government has said, we're not giving out those loans anymore. And they are giving out federal loans still, but they're substantially lower. It is $50,000 per year, $200,000 lifetime. Functionally, that's $150,000 though, because if you're going to law school, you're only going for 3 years unless you do a part-time program. Further, they've really weakened the income-driven repayment and forgiveness options. That's kind of a separate point. I haven't done deep thinking on those, so I don't want to put opinions out there because I don't really know how those matter. What I will say is the whole idea of doing income-driven repayment was always kind of a sketch, in my opinion, because it's the idea that you're going to pay off your loans based on this hopeful promise that the government will forgive you, which could work, but that could always get axed like it just did. And and then further, there's these forgiveness programs by some of the law schools. Guys, they don't have to charge you tuition. If they actually intended to forgive your guys' loans, they wouldn't charge you tuition in the first place. Why do you think that these LRAPs, as they're called, are good things? And I'm only talking to a small chunk of the audience here because most of you probably know what I'm talking about. Good news, you don't know what we're talking about. Actually, well, let's talk about what an LRAP is. So an LRAP is a loan repayment assistance program that a school itself will operate. But who is the money? But like, why even do that? Why have this middleman of the loan resistance and payment program? Just don't charge as much money. Give someone a scholarship. If your intent is to pay them the money back, then why have this middleman of the LRAP? Why not just give your students lower prices or not charge them if you're going to give them the money anyways? And here's the answer: because they're not going to give them the money anyways. They are not actually going to help out all these people that go to these schools based upon these programs. They weasel out of them. They find a way to not pay. And as such, it's to me annoying because for me, what I see savvy business people that are finding a way to convince people that they're doing good in the world, but in reality, they're just really good at separating their students from their money. And they do it by pretending that they care about helping them out with these loan repayment assistance programs. But if they actually cared about not indebting their students and they were going to give them the money back, cut out the middleman. Don't charge them as much in the first place. It's a really easy solution. Anyway, so the point is, the one big beautiful bill, it eliminates GradPLUS loans. That's the change. What is the effect though? What happens? Well, the answer is that if I am some student and I get into Cal Western with, say, a 153.2, which was good enough to get someone into Cal Western, and I need to pay for that because Cal Western charges tuition, I cannot get the money. The funding does not exist. I cannot go to the government, which is how these people got their money, and they did not get it from other places. A bank will not write you that loan because it makes no sense. It is financially lighting money on fire. And the government didn't care because the government was disconnected from the outcome. It was just passed by Congress saying we give money to these people no matter what because education is good. And that's a premise I disagree with. And it's also now a premise that's been eliminated. The whole law school system was built upon this premise of unlimited federal money and putting the students in debt and then having them figure it out, putting them in debt for 20, 30 years, and it's their problem. But that no longer exists. And as such, the money will not come to these schools, which means these monies are going to get destroyed. So what's going to happen is, let's say you're Cal Western. How do they operate? Well, they operate every year by bringing in a class of however many students who pay them each $70,000 in tuition. But that $70,000 no longer exists. At most, these students can get $50,000. And not only $50,000, that's also for their living expenses. So these students were really taking out like $100,000 in loans. So even if they take out $50,000 and hand it right to Cal Western, what are they going to live off of? They're not getting loans, so they will be going bankrupt. So the reality is that these schools will not be able to exist. They were predicated upon a student loan system that did not consider outcomes, and now that has been eliminated. Because yes, private lenders are real and private lenders will write loans. But private lenders also consider, are we ever going to get our money back? And at these schools where it doesn't make sense, they're going to decide no, which means they're going to give $0 to these people. So the reality is that law school is going to get flipped on its head. I think a lot of law schools are going to go out of business this year. They do have the option of taking losses. They can decide that we're going to not, like, if they have a coffers of money, which I don't know that they do, but say Cal Western had $100 million in the bank, which I don't know that they actually have no idea how much cash they have on hand. But if they did, they can try to ride it out and hope that in a few years, the political thing will change and we'll go back to scamming people and having them go into unlimited debt. But outside of that, Cal Western cannot exist because in the free market, it does not survive. The loans don't exist. The money doesn't come to them. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to completely rejigger how they do things. Further, I don't know how many schools there are, but there's a lot. I think that a lot of schools are going to shrink and have fewer people. I think a good amount are going to close. I don't know. I don't want to call my shot too much, but let's see, how many ABA law schools are there? So how many ABA law schools are there? There are 197. Man, should I call my shot? Should I just go out there? 30 will close, 40 next year. I think the number of them that are going to exist, if they don't have money set aside, it's going to be a huge problem. And to be fair, let's just Google how much does Cal Western have in reserves? Does Cal Western have money that they can sustain? Because they're my favorite punching bag, but for good reason. Are they a nonprofit? Because if they are, I can look at their books. Is Cal Western a nonprofit? Which they shouldn't be because, okay, they are a nonprofit. So let's go to ProPublica. ProPublica, for those of you that don't know, is a website where you can explore nonprofits and their finances, because part of being a nonprofit is that you have to put your books public. So let's see what Cal Western School of Law is. I can't find it. California Western, maybe? Here we go. California Western School of Law. So last year they did 50 million in revenue. They have 77.2 million in assets. I don't know how much of that's like real estate because they can't exactly liquidate their real estate, but let's see. Yeah, it just says assets 77 million with 12 million in liabilities. So they have a net assets of 64 million. To put you an idea, they actually don't pay their professors that much. I mean, their president makes 400K a year. They have a professor that makes 250, a professor that makes 220. They only have 6 employees making over 200,000. That is pretty low for a law school. So yeah, let me see how much of that is cash reserves versus how much of that is, what is that? What's the word? Yeah, I can't find it. How much of it's cash? Let's see, and how much of it is, yeah, so they get 40 million in revenue. Okay, I won't go through the whole, I'm not going to read through their whole IRS filing. But the point is that they have 77 million in revenue. They have 46 million in revenue and 41 million in expenses. So they basically operate on all the money they come in, and they have a little bit in assets, which is 70 million, but I don't know how much of that is in like the real estate that they cannot liquidate. And the point is that if something doesn't change, which it won't, because we only have what, 9 months or a year until the loans come due for next year, they won't exist. This school cannot operate. At most, they have 2 years of operational money. They have, assuming that they can liquidate all their assets, which I don't think they can, because I really do think that a lot of this is probably real estate. They have 77 million in the bank, and they have 41 million in expenses per year. So they have less than 2 years of expenses if they cannot get money. And the only way they got money was through federal loan dollars. I mean, to be fair, you could also be an independently wealthy person who will pay for Cal Western, but those people often don't exist because you don't get independently wealthy by making bad financial decisions. And going to California Western School of Law is a bad financial decision. So it's largely people that don't have money who go to the government and they are delusionally optimistic about, I'm going to law school, I'm going to better my life. And the government, because we didn't have a system to actually consider the outcomes, would just give them the money. Okay, long story short, they're fucked. Like, game over. It has come to an end. Bye-bye. Like, if I had to call it, I'll call it 20, 30 schools are going to go out of operation this year. It might be higher. I think that might be conservative. Now, I could be wrong. There might be a part of the equation I'm missing. I don't want to say, like, I know for sure this is going to happen, but I don't see what I'm missing. And what's crazy is no one's talking about this. The idea that there's not going to be like 30 closing law schools this year, to me, that seems like a conservative estimate. I can see a lot of schools because Cal Western is not, like, yes, I pick on Cal Western on the podcast and doesn't you know it, but they are not uniquely bad. There are many schools that are this bad. And yeah, so I mean, I kind of almost want to bump my estimation up. But also, in my opinion, it's a good thing. There's too many law schools. They produce too many attorneys. Most of these people are not going to have successful legal careers. And further, not only will they not have that, so they'll have wasted 3 years, they'll have also wasted a lot of money and potentially put themselves in a financial hole that they'll never crawl out of. So good that these schools are going out of business. Very happy. Good to see that. Okay, so what else does that mean? Well, that means that squeaking into law school is not an option because these schools also, Cal Western's business model is we take people that can't get into law school anywhere else and we charge them an arm and a leg to go to law school so that they can post on Instagram and LinkedIn that they're going to law school, and all their friends who don't actually understand law school will think it's impressive. And you can tell grandma at the Christmas party that you're going to law school and you're going to be a lawyer. Now, mind you, this person's never really going to be a practicing attorney. They're probably going to get terrible job offers, regardless of their grades, because out of Cal Western, you just don't make a lot of money. That's just how, like, the numbers are public. ABA employment reports, you can go look them up. However, people were very excited just to go to law school. So there's a whole tier of law schools that prey upon people that do the bare minimum, getting a low 150s LSAT score, having a mid GPA. To put this in reference, the median LSAT and GPA at Cal Western is a 153 and a 3.39. I mean, these are not people that are likely to crush it in legal careers. And I'm not rooting against anyone, but in reality, like, what does that say about someone? Well, that says that they're not good at reading and they're not good at school, which, like, they're going to law school. So that's a bad combo. A 3.39 in current undergrad is really unimpressive. I was just in undergrad. It is not that hard, guys. It is quite easy. You should be able to get high grades. And if you can't, you need to figure that out. Because I promise you, if you can't get a 4.0 in undergrad, law school is going to kill you. Further, at 153, it's not good. Like, you got to do better than that. And anyone can do better than that with proper effort. And So what I see is that like those people just didn't put the effort in, which means like, are they likely to put the effort in their career? Are they likely to put the effort in their law school? Probably not. I would bet against it. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, really rough. But long story short, like I'm calling my shot. Schools are going out of business this year. It's over. And then further, if you were going to apply to a law school with 155 3.2, it used to work. There used to be schools that would take your money. Those schools will, they still want to take your money. It's not them that's changing, but the people giving you the money no longer exist. The loans coming from the government are not coming to you, which means those law schools, even though they want you, and for what's worth, they don't want you, they want your money. This is not like, oh, they really want you and you're so impressive with your 155 3.2. They were going to scam you. And now the scam is over. The jig is up. There's no more money going to these schools because the government is not going to give them to you. And I promise you, the private lenders are not going to. Okay. Anyways, so you're like, okay, man, the low tier schools are getting fucked up. That's cool. How about the top tier schools? Is it changing for them? The answer is yes. The top tier schools are getting fucked up too. And here's why. Law schools have a cross subsidy. And I guess I need to define my terms a little bit before we proceed. Law schools care about the rankings. The US News rankings, I'm sure many of you have heard of it, the T14, T25, T50. It's kind of bullshit and fugazi, but people do talk about it and people care. And they also care about maintaining their ranking. They care about climbing their ranking because it directly affects their bottom line revenue. The higher ranking you have, the more you can get people to pay. So what happens is that schools try to climb the ranking. And how do they do that? They get high LSAT and high GPA people. There are not infinite, well, it feels like there's infinite high LSAT, high GPA people, but it is still technically finite. There are only 7,000 people with 170 LSAT scores, and every school wants them, so they're all competing for them. And how do you get them? Well, you offer them a better deal. You tell these people that may have been able to go to Yale, because let's say you're a 175 4.0, you get into Yale. If I'm Michigan and I want that student, I have to give them an offer because there's no one in their right mind with those numbers would choose to go to Michigan when they could go to Yale unless there is a meaningful difference between the two. And how can Michigan make that meaningful difference? They can say, hey, don't go to Yale, come to Michigan. We won't charge you money. We will let you come for free. Or maybe not free, but maybe half off. And so what happens is that schools will take from the people that just squeak in and they will offer scholarship to the people that they want. So when I'm someone with a 175 4.0 who got into Yale, Michigan might say, you're better than us. You're a 10, we're an 8. However, we won't charge you money. Yale's going to put you in $250,000 of debt. But if you come to Michigan, you will graduate with a debt-free degree. And a Michigan degree is still very useful in the legal world. So what happens is that they take from the poor, and I mean numbers poor, not actual poor, which to be fair, numbers poor does correlate with the actual poor. So you could argue it's taken from the actual poor. But for our purposes, we'll talk about the numbers poor. It's taken from low LSAT, low GPA, and giving to high LSAT, high GPA. However, how does that work? If I am a bank and I have someone with a 163 3.7 who's squeaked into Michigan, is it a good bet to write them $300,000 in debt? Just like is it a good bet to write someone a Cal Western degree? Now, it's more on the margins. It makes a little bit more sense to write the Michigan student because Michigan is still a good law school. But when someone's coming in with low numbers, it's like, is this person going to crush it at Michigan? They just squeaked in. They have a lower LSAT than their competitors that they're going to be competing for grades or competing with for grades. They have a lower GPA, which means they haven't been as good at school in the past. This is someone who, if I had to bet, is likely to not do well at that law school. They are squeaking in, which means they're probably going to get outcompeted by the kid that could have gone to Yale but chose to go to Michigan. As such, when it comes to get jobs and the firms hire based on who has good grades, it is unlikely that the person I just wrote a loan to with their 163 3.7 is going to have the best grades. It's not impossible, but it is unlikely. And in the world of finance, they are making decisions based on probability and likelihood. And the probability is that if I am writing my loan to this person, it is not as good of a loan as it could be. Now, I don't know how substantial that'll be at these top schools. Because will the financial institutions decide that a T14 at sticker price is still worth it, even for people that just squeak in? They might. But this is going to fade very quickly. Like, what about Boston College? What about the University of Colorado? Does it make sense to let someone go for full price? And what I think we'll find is that a lot of these people are going to be unable to get in. Because Michigan was an extreme example. They're still a T14, and even the person going into Michigan that's squeaking in is still a good applicant. They're not a dummy. But let's say you're someone squeaking into Boulder. Let me just pull up the University of Colorado's 509 report, so I know what someone squeaking in looks like. So someone squeaking into the University of Colorado, their median LSAT is a 164. Their median GPA is a 379. So let's say you're a 3.5, 160. And you're going to the University of Colorado, only 25% of the class gets high-paying jobs. And the University of Colorado charges $42,000 for non-residents and $28,000 for living off campus. So that is $60,000 a year. Add that together, that is $180,000 of law school expenses plus interest, call it 200K, which is low. It's going to be higher than that. And most of these people, about 75% of them are not going to make six figures. That is not a good loan. So the University of Colorado, they are not going to be able to get money from the financial institutions. This is not limited to Cal Western. Now, here's the thing about the University of Colorado. They have a lever they can pull. They can decide to spread the money across everyone. Instead of charging the suckers $40,000, they can decide, okay, we actually have to charge what we're worth. Maybe we need to charge like $25,000 to all of our students. Instead of charging the kids with the low LSATs and low GPAs $43,000 and charging the people we like zero, maybe we have to spread it out across the class. So I suspect that the amount of full rides this year is going to be lower. Now, this is a prediction that I feel really good about this prediction too, just analyzing the incentives, which is that you can't get financial. I mean, this all comes back to one thing, which is financial institutions consider outcomes. And the whole law school system was predicated upon a financial system that did not consider outcomes. The government just giving money. And now that it does, we are going to have changes. So what's going to happen is that I think you're going to see a lot less full rides. Now, there is one exception to this, which is that if I'm a school and I have tons of money in the bank, like how big is Harvard's endowment? Isn't it like $40 billion or something absurd? Yeah, Harvard's endowment is $53 billion. They can just decide that we're going to take a loss. To operate the law school maybe cost them 100, 200 million a year. So they can just decide, I mean, that's a rounding error in their endowment. If the Harvard board of, I don't know if it's regents or whoever makes their financial decisions, but if Harvard decides that we're just going to continue business as usual and we're going to help our students out, they can just take losses and suck up all the good applicants. And so can any rich school. Like low-ranked rich schools can do this and just suck up good applicants with scholarship money. Because the schools that operate by cash flowing year to year and do not have a lot of reserves, they cannot pull these levers. They were reliant on the loan money, and the loan money is stopping. It is getting cut off or at least minimized from the federal government. So schools can self-prop themselves up by using their own money, but not all schools have that option. Because like Cal Western, like we just looked at, they do not have a lot of reserves. They don't have the money to do this. Not because they don't want to, but because they can't. The money doesn't exist. So are there schools that can do this? Like, yes, Yale. Like, how big is Yale's endowment? Probably huge. I think Harvard's is bigger. Yale's is 41 billion. So yeah, they can also take a loss, and it's a rounding error. Stanford's endowment is 37 billion. What's Penn's? 22 billion. So there are schools that have large endowments and can just take a loss. But like, what's Chapman's endowment in California? How much does Chapman have? They have 860 million. So if they decided to spend 200 million on their law school in 1 year, they are just draining their endowment. So for one, they kind of can't. I mean, they could do it, but it would drain their endowment within a few years and they would have no money left over. And then further, this is not just a law school. It's also an undergraduate institution. They have other graduate schools, I presume. So the number of schools that can really decide we're going to drain the endowment to sustain is pretty finite. And further, they're the elite schools that kind of don't have this problem. Because Harvard and Yale, while they're going to be affected by this, they're affected a lot less. Because if you get into Harvard Law School, the amount of banks that are going to write you loans is really high. So what's ironic is the people that the schools that do not rely upon the federal loan dollars are those that are going to be least affected by the changes. Because they could have survived with their endowment, but they don't need to because they're still going to get private loans. Because going to Harvard Law is still a good bet. Going to Yale Law is still a good bet. And when I'm Chase, say I'm a Chase banker, someone comes in for a loan application, they're a 170 LSAT, 3.9, and they're like, I'm gonna go to Harvard Law, I'm accepted, I just need the money. I have money, like dollar signs in my eyes, because I see someone who's going to pay their loan back. If I write them a loan, they're gonna pay back because they're gonna go be a Harvard Law lawyer, which is a very good return on investment. This just does not go very far. There are only about 10 to 15 schools that have that kind of prestige that actually in the legal world guarantee. I mean, maybe you could round it to 20, but it's not 25. Please don't tax top 25 to me. There are top 25 schools that are garbaggio. Or not garbage, I should be careful. They're not garbaggio. They are not the elite institutions that Harvard and Yale are, and they're not even on par with them. Nor are they the institutions that Cornell is. Not to like throw a bone to Cornell. But do not say Minnesota and Cornell in the same sentence, please. They're not the same. I don't care if one was ranked higher than the other. That's not the point. Rankings are often correct. They're also often wrong. So you want to be careful looking at the actual outcomes. I care about outcomes. I don't care about the ranking of US News. And yes, US News tends to correlate with outcomes, but there are funny balls that end up higher than they should be. Utah, we love to shit on Utah. Utah's ranked like 28. Their outcomes suck. They're booty cheeks. So anyway, well, let's continue. What else do we have? And then further, here's another thing. Trending. Did you guys know that law school tuition is actually going down year over year? And you're like, what, Ben? That's not true. Every law school increases their tuition. That is true. However, the net amount that people is paying is going down. So even though, yes, it is true that the listed price on schools' websites goes up year over year, the amount that they are discounting through scholarships versus the amount people are actually paying is trending downwards. So the net cost of to each student is actually trending down year over year, which is kind of crazy. But I think what this is showing is that the market was already responding even prior to the loan changes, and now the loan changes are just really going to throw a can of worms in this thing. Okay, so what else do we have? So yeah, we have a few rebuttals, or I'd say common rebuttals, but let's just go through them. So one, schools can raise tuition. The short answer to this is no, they can't, because now there's market incentives. And if I'm a law school, man, that's a really dumb. Where does that rebuttal even come from? You just can't get the money. Like raising tuition does not solve the problem, because the whole issue is not that there's caps. The issue is that, well, I guess that there is a cap, but that everything over the cap now relies upon incentives and underwriting. So financial institutions actually look at, does this make sense? People also have the idea that like people will just pay for law school using private vendors or private lenders. And the answer is no, they will not, because the lenders won't give them the money. So even if I want to go to the private lender, that doesn't mean they're going to give me a loan. So that's what's going to happen. So yeah, my prediction for this cycle, one, lower ranked schools are facing an existential threat, and I think they are going to succumb to it. I really do think that 20 to 30 law schools are no longer going to exist. I will be keeping you guys posted. And also I could be wrong. There could always be a piece of the puzzle I am missing. But I don't think it's that I'm missing a piece of the puzzle. I think it's that people are so used to this that it's hard to even see it coming. It's such a black swan event for the funding just to get completely changed that people have not even thought about how does this, like, what's the impact? So anyway, the schools are in real trouble. People have mostly been looking at this from the applicant perspective, which is true. A lot of applicants are not going to be able to go to law school. But they also forget that those applicants were going to law school. Where were they going? These schools, and now these schools don't have applicants that can pay. I mean, people still want to go. The school wants the kid to attend, the kid wants to attend, but now there's no money, and that breaks the system. What else do we have? Yeah, and then the top schools, they're going to have to really change their pricing situation, I think, because you just cannot get someone to pay full price if they're a bad bet. If you're someone squeaking into Georgetown, I don't know that a bank will write you a loan, because not everyone from Georgetown gets a high salary. And who's not going to get them? Well, the people probably squeaking in. Now, schools can sidestep this with reserves. By using their endowment, they can just decide we are going to bankroll our law school, which is possible. So what does this mean? Well, it means that it's going to be harder to go to law school, but it's probably a good thing. The number of people going to law school where they are net worse off for it is going to be a lot lower. The amount of people regretting their law degrees will probably go down, because a lot of those people are just not going to be able to go. So they're going to be upset this year, but long term, I think this is a very positive change. I also think so the number of law schools will go down. I think if nothing changes within 10 years, we're probably down to about 100 law schools. I mean, I think they're going to drop like flies. And I could be wrong about this. Like, once again, you can clip this and call me an idiot, but you can also point out that I am caveating this very aggressively. I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but if I had to bet, like, will 0 schools close or will over 20 close? I would take the 20 over the 0. Like, if you were like, hey, Ben, you have to bet one way or the other, I would say probably 20 are going to close. And then, yeah, there's probably going to be fewer lawyers, which I don't know. Is that a bad thing? Most people that graduate law school don't practice law, or not most. I should be careful with my words. A substantial percentage of people that graduate law school never practice law. Is it good that those people are no longer going to exist? I don't know. I think so. I think a lot of them are wasting 3 years of their lives and wasting money. And this is not meant to be like, don't go to law school. It's meant to be, don't go to law school if it's not right for you. And for a lot of these people, it was not right for them. So long story short, clip it. Ben says 20 law schools closed this year. I genuinely think that's true. I have not heard the argument against this. I actually haven't really even heard this argument addressed. I think most people are just ignoring this point, which is that the whole system is changing. And anyway, well, let's move on. You guys have heard my argument. I'm very curious if anyone has a rebuttal or maybe the piece of the puzzle I'm missing. I will know. I've heard pushback on these, and I've had some really silly conversations to the point where it's like, I feel like I'm talking to an intellectual 5-year-old. Like, one person got very frustrated by me saying that the big beautiful bill was a good change for law school. And their whole point was they're going to go to predatory private lenders. And the answer was, oh my God, do you even hear my argument? The point is that they can't go to predatory private lenders because the private lenders don't want to lose money, and they won't write someone a loan to go to a predatory school. They will not give them the money, which means that person just doesn't go to law school. And yes, if you dislike that outcome, if someone doesn't get to go to law school, then yes, that's a bad change. I don't think that's a bad change, because I think those people were just screwing themselves over in the long run. But it was like, if that's going to be your email, which is like this reduces access, just save your email. It's not worth your time, because I'm going to be like, oh, another stupid person. But if you have an actual thought of something I'm missing in terms of financing, or some way that the schools can avoid this giant guillotine, I am open to hearing it. I'm just saying that I haven't heard it thus far. It doesn't mean it's not out there. I just haven't heard it. Okay, so yeah, a few emails LSAT wise. So we should actually talk some LSAT. So let's see what we got. One person emailed me and says, I just got my LSAT score back, August LSAT score. This is from a few weeks ago. And I got a 158. Not too surprising. I ran out of time on 2 sections. Which, real quick, With someone scoring in the high 150s, you should run out of time. You should not be finishing. Until you're scoring in the 170s, you should not be finishing sections. You need to be doing better on the questions you are getting to. And until you are scoring high accuracy on the questions you are doing, you have no business doing more questions, because then you are just training yourself to be sloppy. And I don't want you to be sloppy. I want you to get questions right. So take the time to adequately answer the questions you are doing. What else do they say? I think I went in with the wrong mindset. I was taking it a bit too seriously and overreading everything. Yeah, and that's why you want to practice under realistic conditions so that you know what you're going into. You don't want to be doing something different on test day. When you do something different on test day, you get different outcomes. And I think that's what we're going to run into. She continues. Back in June, I scored a 162. And remember, this is someone who just scored a 158 because I was just going through it for fun. And we both agreed I wasn't quite ready. Haha. Lately, I've been averaging around a 164, but my best score to date is a 168. So yeah, in all likelihood, you probably are 164 plus or minus 5 points. Maybe a 163 because people do tend to be a little generous to themselves. But either way, you're in the 160s and you're scoring 5 points below your range. And I think it's because, one, you probably had a bad day. And then two, you were probably overthinking it. You probably were trying to treat it with too much gravity, which also happens when you place too much gravity on anyone else out. Like, I have to be done with August or else I don't get to apply early. It can add pressure that makes this test a lot harder. So long story short, on lesson one, give yourself time. You guys studying, start studying before you need to. I know some of you listen really early on. Start chipping away at the LSAT for an hour a day before you need to study, because then you can get it done and out of your way. The alternative, which is how most people do it, is they start studying when they have to start studying. And then there's all this pressure. And then on test day, it's I either have to crush it or my life plan falls apart. And that sucks. So don't put yourself in that position. Start studying before you need to. Second, give yourself realistic practice. Sounds like this person struggled because they either let the moment get to them, they let the day pressure themselves, or they didn't do enough prep. Desensitize yourself. Do timed practice. Do it in a condition that's similar to what you're going to do on test day. Whether it's like, I'm going to study on Saturday mornings, I'm going to, I don't know, sit in my office or go to the Starbucks or whatever you need to do, but get those reps in because it pays off. Because then when you're on test day, it's not anything new. Too many people do not go through the pain of struggling through the test. And then by the time they do get to test day, they're like, oh my God, this is new. I haven't done it under these conditions. And yes, of course, it's harder when you haven't done it under those conditions. She continues. I'd love to get any feedback or tips you have since I'm registered for both the September and October LSAT. I usually end up scoring around 20 on the LR sections with RC being about the same. So yeah, I said, get better at the questions. It's not too deeper. So anyways, that's that. I won't go too much deeper into it, but I think the point that I wanted to hit on with this one was that give yourself time to prep. It really is the saddest thing when and this is someone who I think is going to pull it off. I don't think this person's lost because I know this person quite well. But for many of you, you guys put yourselves in this position where October is your last chance at the LSAT or November is your last chance. And then if anything goes wrong, which it will, because what can go wrong will go wrong. I believe that's Murphy's law. Everything falls apart. So assume that everything's going to go wrong and plan so that even if everything goes wrong, you still succeed. And that's what happens when you start studying a year and a half before you need to take the test. Because then, best case scenario, you're done with it in 5 months and you can just move on. Worst case scenario, it takes you 18 months. You have those 18 months and your life does not fall apart. Too many of you do it backwards and it really punishes you guys. Okay, what else do we have? So I have another email. This is a thank you email from the August LSAT. I have some August LSAT emails. I just haven't gone through them in a while. And it said, hey, Ben, I'm sure you're getting miraged with emails. I think the word you're looking for is bombarded or barraged, but I like miraged. Well, what would that mean? Miraged with emails. Like they're fake, they're not real. That'd be a bummer. I hope people sending me emails are real and I'm not some crazy person in an insane asylum on my computer thinking I'm running an LSAT company. And in reality, I'm just like tweaking out on my, that's a kind of a fun thought. I mean, I don't know. I think therefore I am. I don't really know if this is going out to anyone, but I think it is based on, my anyway, so I'm being miraged with emails for score release day, but I just want to say a massive thank you. I was practice testing at a 153 when I started with you in April, but between your class, your tips, course content, and general aim of doing a section every day, I shot up and just got my score from August dash 166 exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yeah, so 153 to 166 in what is that? 4 months? Pretty good. I mean, you can always go further. You can get higher than 166, and given what we talked about earlier with how many high LSATs there are, it might be wise to push further. But obviously, a 166 versus 153 is night and day. Your outcomes are going to be entirely different. I mean, realistically, with a 153, you probably weren't going to get into law school this cycle. It used to pull off. It can't. This cycle doesn't work. Now, a 166, you're a good applicant. I think this kid has a 4.0, if I remember correctly. He's going to get good outcomes. So it's really exciting to see. They continue. This score opened so many doors for me that I never thought possible just 4 to 5 months ago. The financial burden for my family and I, especially with all the changes, is going to likely be so much less now, and that really is a life-changing thing. Beyond excited for applications to open up and start pursuing my dream. Can't thank you enough for all the support and insight these past 4 months. Cheers. All the best, so and so. So yeah, I mean, these are the best emails to get. I really do appreciate it when you guys reach out to us, even if you never worked with us, which you should. But even if you didn't, it's still cool to hear that we've been like a voice in your LSAT prep as you've studied. And yeah, anyways, I just always think it's encouraging. You guys all can get better. And further, this person could go further if they wanted to. Like, none of you have to stop at 166. You can go deeper. And it can make sense, especially depending on your outcomes. Because maybe this sounds like, oh man, I can now get into a bottom T14 if you have a 4.0 166. It's like, maybe, but if you go further, the world is your oyster. So anyways, I just thought that was cool. Do we want to do a personal statement? I don't know. Should we? Okay, let's do a personal statement just to be mean. Well, this will be our last topic for the day, but we'll end with a personal statement. So here we have, and it's titled name final draft.pdf. So I will be the determinant of whether or not it's a final draft, but we shall see. Quick inclination, it is double spaced. It is, which is good. It is 2 pages, which is good. So overall, just initially looking at it, it looks like a proper personal statement. A lot of you guys fuck it up where you write like 4 pages. These are 2 pages double spaced, and you haven't messed with the margins. You haven't messed with the font. It's like Times New Roman, I think, which is beautiful. I love that. So in terms of style points, you immediately win. Now it's funny because all of you should win on style points, but unfortunately you guys do not because you guys are goofballs and you pick. Why do we feel the need to pick a new font? Guys, Times New Roman, it is not rocket science. Times New Roman 12 point double space. Like, what are we doing here? And I'm not yelling at the person who submitted this. Your email or your draft, it actually looks really good. I'm complimenting you here. However, formatting is one thing, content's another. So let's see how you hold up. They write, on my second day in bankruptcy law, my first full-time legal job of any kind, I found myself on the phone with a client who had just been subpoenaed to provide the deed and appraisal of their home. And I love this. This is you doing actual legal work. I would get rid of the appositive clause in your first sentence, which is my first full-time legal job of any kind. That's almost disempowering because I see you kicking ass, but now you're saying it's like, oh, it's the first effort I've ever done. I would just cut that. But overall, what do we know about our applicant? I know they work in bankruptcy law and they are talking to a client. Good. That's great. Because this person, are they going to have done legal stuff? Probably not lawyer stuff, but it is legal related, which makes me believe that they're going to be a kick-ass lawyer a lot more than just saying they are. So far, I like it. Points in your favor. A little dry, but it's at least factual. So I'd already put this like well above average. They continue. Attorneys were arguing, papers flew across desk, and the sales teams pounded their fists as if we were on an investment banking trading floor in New York City. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit artsier than I like, but it's not bad. The point is you're showing that like this is chaotic and I'm working in this chaotic environment. So I like it. They continue. That was my introduction to the Van Horn, actually redacted law group. Right off the bat, I learned that a legal assistant is essentially a cheaper alternative to an attorney, but just can't give legal advice. Okay. I mean, I'm gonna cut that. I don't know. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I just don't know. So, okay, sure. You're a legal assistant and you're like a cheaper version of a lawyer and you can't give advice. Our job is to handle all the busy work. I would just say my job. I know you probably have coworkers, but it's stronger when you say mine. Like legal research and leave the arguing and the court appearances to the lawyers. So you're doing legal busy work. Good. Love that. I'd prefer to see a specific case, but I hope you get into that. If you do, that's fantastic. But I do like this. Like I actually see you as like this person does legal work. And assuming you have the LSAT GPA, this is like, I don't even know that I'm reading further because like you've already won this, already a good statement. I'm like, yeah, this person kicks ass, green stamp of approval. If you have the numbers, you're on to the next stage. They continue. Yeah, there is another side to the business, especially at the Van Horn Law Group. Whoops, I said it again. Redacted, a firm that files the most bankruptcy cases a month in all of redacted state. So yeah, it's a big bankruptcy firm. Good for you. Efficiency, technical solutions, and competitive strategy were key aspects often discussed in meetings I attended. I would cut that. I don't want to hear us discussed at meetings you attended. I want to see what you did. Overall, though, that's one sentence out of the first paragraph that I would cut. And so far, what have we learned about our applicant? They do legal assistant work. And I mean, I don't really know what they've done beyond doing it, but you are doing actual work, and that is a giant point in your favor. So good. So far, this is well above average. Is it blowing the socks off? No, but you don't have to. This is someone I want at my law school if I'm a law school. They continue. The business focus side of the firm was where I began to take on projects that went beyond casework and directly improved how the firm operated. Yeah, that's very abstract. Like I like that you're taking on projects, but just say like, here's something I did to improve the firm. We don't need the prelude to it. Just get right into it. They continue. One of my most notable projects was writing an algorithm. Don't say that. I would work on the transition. Just start with I wrote an algorithm to automate something. Like I noticed a problem and I fixed it for the whole firm. But let's see what they did. One of my most notable projects was writing an algorithm that automated the manual process of extracting, renaming, and sorting 10,000 client documents per month. Yeah, that sounds like a huge pain in the ass, and you solved it using technology. That is awesome. I would just, instead of saying, here's a project I did, I would say, I identified a problem. Like through my work, I saw this problem. I knew I could fix it. I fixed it for the full firm. And they're like, wow, this person kicks ass. The partner said that I was like, he wishes I was his child. Like, I mean, it's not the content that I dislike. I just dislike how you're presenting it. But overall, this is good. Like this is still really strong. I'm being nitpicky here. They continue. After these few lines of code, the documents department became obsolete and scattered into other specialties. Yeah, fire them. Fuck those nerds. Replaced by technology. I'm kidding. But also, yeah, good. Like you've automated work. This accomplishment helped prove that I do have a knack for business solutions and that my BBA may after all be producing some. Cut that. I don't care about some subtle jab at your bachelor's of business administration. I also don't need to say you don't need to say you have a knack for business solutions. You just showed us. So just cut that sentence entirely. Do not say this accomplishment proved what you just showed us. Like we already know that it showed that you solved the problem. You don't have to say, look, I solved the problem. It's like we got it. They continue. I saw pleasure in envisioning the firm from a business perspective, especially when my solutions are in effect. Cut that. I don't care. I don't want to see you being in business. I want you to be a lawyer. So cut those last two sentences, but overall the meat of that is good. If you want to add content, just talk about what you did. How did you write the algorithm? Like, did you use AI? Did you write the code yourself? Was it from, did you look up a YouTube tutorial? How long did it take you? Did you do it on your own time? How did the firm respond to it? Like, there's all these facts you could insert that would make this so much more powerful. And instead, you're like making a joke about how your bachelor's degree might not be totally useless, which like I have sympathy for, but also that's not the point of this document. The point is to present yourself, not like be a comedian. So I would cut that. They continue. At the same time, my role demanded sharp legal awareness where attorneys would rely on us to make impactful judgment calls on our client flows. Yeah, show that. Don't tell us. Just give us an example. One of my main objectives was to clear clients for their 341 meeting of creditors, the pinnacle of the bankruptcy process, where creditors can object and search for hidden assets. Okay, I don't hate that. I don't love how it's phrased. It's passive. One of my main objectives was, I would say I did X, not one of my objectives was. It sounds like you're very passive, so eliminate the passive voice. They continue. For one high-profile client in a personal bankruptcy, I discovered just hours before their hearing that a property had been transferred months earlier into their business's name to try to avoid liquidation, despite their claim that the business held no assets. I knew the courts would inevitably figure this out, so I advised the attorney not to appear, which prevented the client from being exposed by their creditors. Interesting. So you came up with a solution to a problem. I love that. That's good. I don't know if this is allowed. It sounds allowed. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if just not showing up to a hearing works, but if that is a solution, good. You found a crafty solution. They continue. I took great pride in this work because of the rewarding feeling you get when a client expresses deep appreciation. Cut that. I don't want to see you feeling pride. I want to see you kicking ass. So you just kicked ass. You just solved a problem for one of your clients. You don't say, I felt great pride. Like, act like you've been here before. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but also like cut it. I don't need to hear how you feel. I don't care about your feelings. I just care, are you going to kick ass and be a legal monster? So I saw you being a legal monster, cut the whole sentimental caterpillar bullshit. Anyway, they continue. Throughout college, my plan had always been to go directly to law school. I don't care about your plan. I just care, will you be a good lawyer? Whether or not it's recently formed or long formed is not the point. The point is, are you going to kick ass? They continue. But after graduation, I chose to pause my application. All right, so now it's you arguing for like whether this is bad. This is you're now trying to justify your gap in your resume. No one even thinks about this until you bring it up. You guys often bring up the worst parts of your applications because you feel like people are looking for them. I didn't even know that you had a gap in your resume, but now I'm thinking about it because you brought it up. You're bringing up your own insecurities, and now I'm thinking about your insecurities. Don't mention them and it won't be a problem. When you guys mention your insecurities, it needs to be cut. So you have a whole paragraph on why you took a break from school, about why you want to get an MBA. Like just cut this. Like all of this. Bye-bye. Cut it out. And then your final paragraph, I'm not going to cut that one. No need to explain your gap. It's just calling attention to a bad part of your application, which also, a gap is not a bad thing. It's not the harm you think it is. But when you call attention to it, it makes it feel like you're like, you doth protest too much. Like you're excusing it. And now I'm thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it, but now I'm thinking about it. So just cut that. Overall, you had a really good statement up until that point. And then you have a conclusion, which is longer than I like. Typically, I like a 2 to 3 line conclusion. This is about 10, which is way too long, but let's read it. High volume, fast, and stressful environments reveal true character. Sure, but I don't need you to tell me that, so just cut it. Walking into the office that first week, I'm at a turning point in my life, one that many young professionals come across. Yeah, cut that. I mean, it's true. Starting a job is meaningful. Also, I don't care. I care about you and why you're going to kick ass in law school. They continue. There are paths each type of person takes at that point, which is true, but I don't care. I am proud of the paths I've taken and the legal candidate I've built myself into. I chose to be a leader, a problem solver, but most importantly, a helping hand to those who need it. I am pursuing this degree not just for a credential, but to gain a deeper understanding of the concepts that, when paired with my character, will allow me to make a lasting impact. When I think back to my second day on the phone with that client, I smile because in that chaos, structure was built within my career, my goals, and myself. I mean, it's not bad. It's just very generic. I'd shorten that down. I mean, it's very like trite and boring, but that's pretty typical for a conclusion. Cut it down to like 2 sentences and you'll be fine. I mean, the meaning, like, there's nothing I want to nitpick too much other than like, oh my God, I get it. Everyone says I'm going to be a leader and be a voice for the voiceless and, be a problem solver and blah, 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 blah. Well, I mean, you guys all say it, so it becomes very boring. And like, I know you guys, having written it, it feels very authentic to you. I will tell you, someone who reads essays, you're just like, oh my God, shut up. So anyways, just shorten it down so that they don't have that feeling. Keep it to the interesting stuff, which is different. You want the differentiation about how you are kicking ass and like maybe go deeper on what that not appearing in court looked like and how that was a solution. There was further questions I have, which is like, is that allowed? Was there fallout? And we don't even get the questions on those. So I would go further into that. Otherwise, well above average, I'd say like a 168 personal statement. Is it going to blow the socks off Harvard? No. Does it get you into all law schools as like, or do most law schools read that and go like, this person kicks ass? Yes, they do. So overall, good job. You've done a good job. That's probably the best one we've had on the podcast in a while, and it will perform well. Still some edits to make, as I gave you here. I mean, you can also just take the transcript of this, put it into AI and say, hey, write out the changes I need to make. And it would tell you like a bullet point list of changes to make. But overall, strong essay. So good job. Hey folks, quick amendment. So I filmed the whole episode already, which you're about to listen to. In the episode, I talk a lot about how law schools are going to lose funding from federal loans. And after getting off, I realized a consideration that I hadn't quite articulated or thought about. I mean, I didn't think about it, nor did I talk about the impacts. So the point that I wanted to touch on, and I will insert this clip at the beginning of the podcast, so just keep this in mind when I'm talking about the revenue. Law schools are not losing all of their federal loan revenue. They're only going to lose 1/3, because while they do lose the people that are coming in next fall with their loans, they are not going to lose their 2Ls and their 3Ls. So they're only going to lose 1/3 of revenue this year. Next year, they will lose 2/3 revenue. And then afterwards, they will lose all of their revenue. So they won't have a full loss of federal loan dollars until 2028. So my predictions about how catastrophic this is going to be are not as high. In fact, I want to amend my predictions downwards. So you hear me talk about how I might be missing a piece of the puzzle. This is the piece of the puzzle I missed. That being said, over these 3 years, I would still expect my predictions to come true. I think we are still going to see a contraction of the legal market, and you're about to hear my extreme takes. But I did want to quickly jump in and amend my predictions, which is that it is not as extreme this year. It is still a giant problem these law schools are going to have to reckon with, but they're not going to reckon with this next fall entirely. They're going to reckon with 1/3 of the problem, then they're going to reckon with 1/3 of the problem the year after, and then 1/3 the year after that. But the full change in terms of cutting off the federal loan dollars does not hit until 2028. And having that thought, I wanted to get in there and amend it, because whenever I see issues in my thinking, which we just identified one, I missed a piece of information that does matter. I want to amend it. So now you're going to listen to Ben mouth off about stuff and honestly be wrong in some of the predictions I make, but that's why I was wrong. I didn't factor in the timeline in which these effects hit, and we're very evidence-based here. So when we make something wrong, we try to amend it. That being said, my predictions still stand over the long term. It's just the timeline the schools have to figure things out is a little bit longer than I had initially thought, which is they only had about a year. They actually have, well, they have a year until 1/3 of it hits, but it's 1/3, not all of it, which was a premise I was mistakenly operating off of. So that might make sense. It might make more sense at the end. So I'm actually going to insert this explanation at both the beginning and the end. Listening to what I just said might make more sense after you've listened to the whole episode. Just ignore it. If you get to the end and you're like, I don't want to hear Ben talk about that again, I already listened. But anyways, I thought that was important to insert. And with that, you can hear my crazy predictions about what's going to happen. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.